Hello everyone, this is the Power Trip here for the next issue, and today we're going to discuss the many faces of Superboy. Now, unlike previous times that I've discussed characters, I'm not going to start with the oldest and work to the newest. I'm actually going to work backwards. That way, well, to be honest, a lot of things with the oldest Superboy is a lot more convoluted than the stuff with the newer Superboy, which may be hard to believe for some, but it's, well, just wait and hear for it yourself. Now, current claim to fame for the Superboy title is pre-New 52 Superman and Lois's son, John. Or as I should say, Jonathan Samuel Kent. He is still developing his powers, and looks to be here in the near future joining up with possibly the Teen Titans, but definitely getting a group book with Batman's son, Damian. Now, this character is interesting because it's one of, not quite, but one of the first times that a Superboy has been actually the heir to Superman in the sense of actually his son, and not just a clone or whatever alternate reality versions you could come up with. Now, he is still alternate reality, which does make this a little bit more confusing, but as I've touched on before, we're not entirely sure what the pre-New 52 Superman's story in the New 52 universe is going to end up being for the endgame, so we are not entirely sure how much that is true for his son and wife as well. So going by that logic, right now we're just going to stick with the two main facts we know. He is the birth child of Superman and Lois, and technically, right now, he is from a previous timeline. Now, he is still developing his powers, but he still has basically the same base powers as Superman. And a very awesome Superboy costume to boot with that. There's not a whole lot to go into here other than, he's a young kid learning everything, very innocent, just now getting all this darker points of the DC universe thrown at him, and you couldn't ask for a better father figure to teach him and integrate him into this than the pre-New 52 Superman anyway. Because as I've said before, this is the more father figure of the DC Universe version of Superman that they ever had. So, Jonathan Samuel Kent is definitely in good hands here. Going before that is the mixed, we're going to do these both at the same time because I have a mixed history here. The New 52 version of Connor Kent and his ties to the alternate New 52 timeline that had Jonathan Lane Kent, and this is why I was having to stress the middle names more so there. Jonathan Lane Kent is from an alternate timeline of the New 52 specifically, a pocket universe type thing, which is a homage to the original Superboy, but we'll get into that. Jonathan Lane Kent, JLK, is also the birth child of Superman and Lois, but his genetics was not able to maintain his body per se. He has more similar powers to what Connor has, both pre and current New 52, with some tactile telekinesis and also being able to control other versions of Superboy through the multiverse. But he is constantly in a state of dying, and thus that's what ties him to the New 52 Superboy, Connor Kent, as at one point he did die, and a being from the 30th century named Harvest gathered up his body, found out he was not what you would call true death in comics, and brought him back to life. His body's still in a state of decay, so to speak. Harvest took him back in time and used samples of John, the Superman and Lois of the current New 52 timeline, to clone and make Connor. And that's what the New 52 Connor is a hybrid of all three, being used as a way to cure John. Now, This inevitably came to a head as Connor and past John were able to defeat future John. See, John, under Harvest's rules, was being used as a way to kill all other metahumans in the future. And Harvest was trying to bring him back in time to stabilize him and do the same thing again in the past, just basically ahead of schedule. Things did not go as planned, and the future Titans ended up taking John back into the future. Sorry, I guess John's timeline is a little bit more convoluted than what we thought before, but going into it, basically, present John and Connor of the future banded together to stop evil John of the future. At one point, basically destroying his timeline, erasing him, but not completely from history. Everyone still remembers him, but everything about him was completely undone. This basically was going to come to that head anyway, seeing as how in New 52 timeline, Superman and Lois were only friends. Superman and Wonder Woman were more of a romantic interest with possible ties of a future marriage and such. And Superman and Lois of the New 52 timeline didn't really have that much of a, if any, real romantic ties there. Taking Connor and bouncing back, his history, Connor Kent is more well known for his time pre-New 52, premiering right after the death of Superman originally. He was a clone of Superman, and for the longest time, nobody knew what the other half was, whether that was because the writers just didn't want to say, or they didn't actually write that in because they didn't want to bind him to something, because not having the other half of who he was cloned from announced to the public and such, or even as thought of, kept his powers and his origin and everything open to more stories. You could do more with him. As soon as you tied that other half to him, even if it wasn't that much of one, you still gave him some of a limit. And that's what they did eventually when they tied it to the fact that pre-New 52 Connor was the clone of Superman and Lex Luthor. Of course, now with these ties implemented, we got to find out that Luthor had always had a hand in Connor, and had actually put in trigger words in him to activate him like a sleeper agent. But I don't believe they ever really went into the idea of how Luthor and Superman's DNA created the extra powers that Connor had, as opposed to, but it did explain why his invulnerability was a lot more limited than Superman's, and why he did not have X-ray vision, or even why he had a vulnerability to heat early on in his career. But Connor eventually grew from the 90s punk kid that we saw into a much more, basically a very prideful young man and very strong hero. You could definitely tell he was going to take over as Superman eventually. He was being very well groomed in that department. He was his generation's Superman, and he was doing very well before the reboot. He was one of the most popular characters at the time before New 52 happened, due to how well he was written, how well he was carried, and once again, like I've said before with pre-New 52 Superman, that father figure aspect was carried through Connor as he was becoming the more father figure-esque, that guiding light for his generation. So now I'm going to touch on the big one here. The first Superboy. This one's a toughie, because the first Superboy was actually supposed to be the adventures of the Silver Age Superman, the extremely overpowered, no one would ever beat him, no matter what, Superman. And this was what the original Superboy was. It started off as just the tales of a younger Superboy, kind of giving, kids a chance to read more about kid heroes, and in some aspects taking advantage of like the popularity of Superman to kids way back in the day, and saying, well, I'd like, what would he have been like as a kid? Would he have liked to play ball? Would he have liked to, hang out and, ride a bike with us and stuff? That's while still showing off his powers, which are so awesome. This was kind of where that character was going with that back in the day. And so it was the younger adventures of him in Smallville, mostly protecting Smallville and being with his girlfriend Lana and stuff like that. And then the Crisis on Infinite Earths happened, and it basically redid everything to where Superman, since it combined everything into one, it made it, and with the new history after the first Crisis, Superman was never Superboy. He never showed his powers or anything. He stayed hidden until he got to Metropolis. This, in turn, created some conflict, though, because Superboy, the pre-Crisis Superboy, had many, many adventures with the Legion of Superheroes. Many adventures. Together, they were some of the big books for DC at the time. And the Legion's history, being so tied to Superboy, got extremely convoluted and really messed up, basically, because of this. Because they wrote out Superboy, but they didn't write out the Legion and a lot of its history. So they had to use one of their time villains, basically, to manipulate things and create a pocket universe. And at first, this pocket universe was supposed to be their explanation for why the Legion would still manage to have access to that version of Superboy, and that Superboy was never the Silver Age Superman. It was this Pocket Age Superman who just mimicked his powers. The storyline where this originally happened, where that Superboy ended up being killed by the Time Trapper. That particular storyline also once again showed why that Superman that Superman's power level, as that Superboy was able to overpower the post-Crisis Superman. Now, later, they ended up really getting into, I think it was around Infinite Crisis. They went back to saying Superman's history was changed again after the second Crisis, where he did start doing stuff as Superboy. This, in turn, basically gave him a chance to feed that stuff into the Legion again so that their history wasn't too convoluted. They had also previously put in the idea that the Pocket Universe was... The whole idea of the Pocket Universe was changed again. Superboy wasn't from that Pocket Universe anymore. That Pocket Universe kind of manipulated reality to where they were accessing the Silver Age Superboy through the Pocket Universe, even after the first Crisis happened. That Pocket Universe gave him access to him. So he was... Even the Pocket Universe Superboy's history there was changed because of that. And see, this is why I was telling you things were a lot more convoluted with this particular Superboy. You get to see him during Zero Hour actually go one-on-one with Con-El, who, already being a clone, half human, half Superman, is completely outmatched by Superboy's Silver Age powers in every way. It's very ridiculous to read and take a look at that, but it's very interesting as well. But that version of Superboy, he did die, but at the same time they've been trying to tie in, as they merge and unmerge things with the multiverse with DC. That version of Superboy has come and gone. His grave may or may not still be there, and even if it is there, that doesn't mean the body's there anymore. If they're still, or at least by pre-New 52, if they were trying to tie the idea that Superboy was the modern age Superman. And I'd completely forgotten one of my personal favorites. I know a lot of people are going to hate me for this one, and that is Superboy Prime. So this Superboy showed up during... either right before or during the first Crisis. And his history is extremely similar, but you got to remember Earth Prime is supposed to be our Earth. It's the regular Earth, and it doesn't have any superheroes. So Superboy Prime was, instead of crash landing in a ship, was actually teleported to his parents' doorstep and named Clark Kent. And he dressed as Superboy for a costume party. And then all of a sudden, he started getting his powers. Whether or not this was due to the fact that the crisis was going on affecting the multiverse and that was opening up more doors between universes or not entirely sure. But over the years, I'm not going to get into everything with Superboy Prime, but one thing that anyone that's ever followed him would be able can tell you is Superboy Prime was extremely powerful, even more powerful at times than the Silver Age Superman. Superboy Prime had all the base powers of Superman and everything, but he also had the ability to absorb energies and become even more powerful, which Superman already does with solar energy, but Superboy Prime could do it with any energy. And I've got a working theory that's never been confirmed on this, obviously, but the thing in Superboy Prime, it always took everyone to take him down. Superman could not go one-on-one with Superboy Prime. He was just too powerful. And the key to this being is, since he was from our universe, the main core universe, the DC universe, of course he's going to be that powerful. He's from the universe that sparked the entire DC universe. He's from our universe. Any heroes that ever do come from here, like our version of Batman, our version of, if we want to cross into Marvel, our version of Spider-Man, our version of these heroes that show up, at least by the standards set by Superboy Prime, are going to be like the ultimate version of that hero, because they are the closest to the core of the multiverse they can be when they're created that way. That's not to say they are the true version of the character, but they are going to be the better version, so to speak. Superboy Prime, like I said, being completely unstoppable, but unfortunately also being completely unstable and going completely psychotic and trying to destroy everything, mostly just trying to get home. But once again, as I said, not perfect and not always good, but power-wise and skill-wise, by the standards set that way, and going by the logic of this is the core Earth, is going to be the heroes. If they ever were to say there was a Batman Prime or a Wonder Woman Prime that shows up, those heroes are going to end up being versions that outclass your normal standard DC Universe heroes by that point. Well, that's all the time I have for this week. Follow up with me next week on the article, the follow-up article to this. I'll be more than happy to go into way more detail with all the Superboys, including Superboy Prime. And I'll see all of you for the next issue.